Aiden squinted as violet sunlight filtered through the thick canopy above him. Even after 2 weeks on Altar, the planet's constant twilight still messed with his internal sense of time. Checking his wrist display, he noted it was 7:30 local time, then quickened his pace down the crystalline walkway toward the Science Institute. Running late on the 3rd day. Stellar impression, he muttered under his breath. The towering spires of the Institute gleamed in the distance, their surfaces reflecting the purple light in captivating patterns. Normally, Aiden would have stopped to appreciate the view, but today Commander Karan Delka would be assigning him his permanent post, and the Altari valued punctuality above almost everything, except for their absurdly complex social structure. As he neared the Institute gates, 2 Altari guards snapped to attention. Their iridescent violet skin shimmered beneath their metallic armor, and their green vertical pupils narrowed as they assessed him. Identification, the taller one demanded, her voice smooth but cold. Aiden slapped his palm against the biometric scanner with exaggerated force. Aiden Reyes, Earth Exchange Program, Cybernetics Division, he said. The scanner flashed green, but the guards didn't relax their posture. You are exactly 8 minutes and 43 seconds late, Technician Reyes, the second guard remarked. Commander Delka has noted your tardiness. Aiden sighed, muttering, of course he has. He flashed them a salute, the kind that would have earned him a reprimand back in any Earth military unit, and stepped through the gates. Inside, the Institute buzzed with activity. Altari scientists and administrators moved through the halls with purpose, their silver hair intricately braided to signify rank and discipline. It was a sharp contrast to Aiden's own messy, dark curls, which he'd barely bothered to run a hand through that morning. He navigated the maze-like corridors by instinct, finally arriving at Commander Delka's office, exactly 11 minutes behind schedule. Taking a deep breath, he knocked. Enter. Delka stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, his tall figure imposing as always. His ceremonial robe shimmered with embedded status markers, tiny lights broadcasting his achievements and lineage to anyone who could decipher them. Technician Reyes, Delka said, not turning away from the window. Your punctuality leaves much to be desired. Sorry, sir. Still getting used to the planetary cycle. Aiden replied, trying to mask his irritation. You've had 16 days to adjust. That excuse expired 15 days ago. Delka finally turned to face him, his eyes narrowing. However, your technical qualifications are impressive, which is why, despite my concerns, I've assigned you to one of our most prestigious research divisions. Aiden's interest peaked despite himself. What division would that be, sir? Xenobiological integration, Delka answered. You'll be working directly with Lady Celia Reyna on cross-species cellular regeneration. Aiden's eyebrows shot up. Reyna? As in the High Council Reyna? The very same, Delka confirmed. Lady Celia is third in line for the family seat and the Institute's leading expert in xenobiology. Aiden's mind raced, but Delka's stern gaze quickly brought him back to the present. Try not to embarrass our species, Delka added with a faint smirk that might have been a smile, had it been a little warmer. No pressure, then, Aiden muttered, but Delka didn't acknowledge the sarcasm. Lady Celia will meet you in Laboratory 7 in 20 minutes. Do not be late. Delka paused, and Technician Reyes, Lady Reyna, is not accustomed to Earth's casual demeanor. I suggest you adjust accordingly. Crystal clear, sir, Aiden replied, his voice flat, though he managed to suppress his sarcasm this time. As he left the office, Aiden couldn't help but groan inwardly. Another high-ranking aristocrat. Just what he needed. He had come to Altar to work on cutting-edge tech, not to navigate the endless maze of alien politics. Laboratory 7 was easy enough to find. It was 3 times the size of the other labs, with windows overlooking the Academy's lush gardens. Aiden paused at the door, straightened his uniform, and tried to tame his wild hair before entering. The door slid open before he had a chance to knock. Inside, the lab gleamed with advanced equipment that would make Earth's top facilities look like children's toys. Holographic displays flickered with complex molecular structures, and the hum of high-powered computing systems filled the air. But it wasn't the technology that caught Aiden's attention. It was Lady Celia Reyna herself. She stood at the central console, her back to him. Even from behind, she commanded attention. Tall for an Altari, with silver hair cascading down her back in intricate braids that spoke of her high status. When she turned, Aiden struggled to maintain his professional composure. Her features were striking. High cheekbones, full lips, and almond-shaped eyes with vertical pupils of the most intense green, almost golden in the lab's light. Her violet skin seemed to glow from within, and the scientific attire she wore did little to hide her graceful figure. "Technician Reyes," she said, her voice cool and melodic. "You're early. How unexpected, given your records so far." Aiden blinked, thrown off balance. Spare me the Earth pleasantries," Lady Reyna interrupted, her tone cutting through his confusion. "Commander Delka informed me of your unconventional approach." She gestured toward a workstation. "You'll be stationed there. Your access is limited to non-critical systems until you prove yourself trustworthy." Aiden's momentary awe quickly turned into irritation. "With all due respect, Lady Reyna, I was top of my class at MIT Luna and have 3 patents in regenerative cybernetics. I didn't come all the way to Altar to be treated like an intern." Lady Reyna raised a single silver eyebrow, the only sign that his words had any impact. "Impressive credentials for a human, certainly. However, on Altar, trust is earned, not assumed, no matter your academic achievements." She turned back to her console. "Today, you'll familiarize yourself with our systems and review the project parameters." Aiden bit back his frustration. "And what exactly is this project?" Delka mentioned cross-species cellular regeneration, but didn't provide any details. Lady Reyna tapped her console, and a holographic display materialized between them, showcasing a complex molecular structure rotating slowly in midair. "We are developing methods to regenerate tissue across species," she explained. "Currently, most medical technology is species-specific. A skin regenerator designed for Altari would be useless, possibly harmful, for humans. We aim to change that." Aiden's curiosity flared. "Universal regeneration tech? That's revolutionary." Lady Reyna's eyes flickered with what could have been pride. "Indeed, the applications could be extensive, especially for frontier colonies with mixed species populations." Aiden studied the molecular structure. "This is hormone-based, correct? You're focusing on triggering natural regeneration processes rather than using synthetic replacements." "Precisely," she replied. Aiden moved closer to the display, his scientific curiosity overtaking his annoyance. "Smart. Less chance of rejection. But you'd need a universal cellular receptor that doesn't exist in any known species." Lady Reyna's eyes widened slightly, a rare display of surprise. "That is our current obstacle." She hesitated before adding, "Would you like to review our current formula?" Aiden nodded. "I'd be happy to." Over the next few hours, Aiden immersed himself in the work. Despite Lady Reyna's cold demeanor, she was brilliant, and their scientific discussions flowed more easily than he'd expected. By mid-afternoon, he had identified several potential modifications to their approach. "If we adjust the molecular binding here," he said, manipulating the holographic structure, "we could create a receptor that mimics both human and Altari cellular structures." Lady Reyna leaned in, her silver hair brushing against his shoulder as she examined his modifications. Aiden caught a faint scent, something like cinnamon and ozone, and found himself momentarily distracted. "Interesting approach," she admitted. "Unorthodox, but potentially viable." "That's me," Aiden quipped. "Unorthodox, but effective." A faint twitch at the corner of Lady Reyna's mouth might have been the beginning of a smile. Aiden counted it as a small victory. "You may begin synthesizing a prototype tomorrow," she said, stepping back. "But for now, it's late. The first meal rotation has already begun in the communal hall." Aiden glanced at his display and realized they'd worked straight through lunch. "Thanks, but I think I'll pass on the Altari cuisine tonight. Last time I tried it, my tongue went numb for 3 hours." Lady Reyna's lips quirked upward. "You were served traditional car." It's considered impolite not to finish it, despite the neurotoxins. Neurotoxins? You eat neurotoxins for fun? Aiden asked, incredulous. In carefully regulated amounts, she replied. They produce a pleasant sensation for us. I forgot humans lack the necessary enzymes to process them properly. Aiden stared at her, wondering if she was joking. But her neutral expression gave nothing away. Simply an observation, she said before turning back to her work. The following 2 weeks passed in a blur. A routine developed. Aiden would arrive at the lab each morning, increasingly on time, and they would work together on refining the regeneration formula. Despite their differing approaches, Aiden preferring intuitive leaps, while Lady Reyna worked through each possibility methodically, they made surprising progress. Aiden also made it his personal mission to crack through Lady Reyna's icy exterior. He dropped casual jokes, shared stories about Earth, and occasionally asked about Altari culture. At first, she responded with minimal courtesy, but gradually her responses grew longer, and sometimes, just sometimes, he caught a flicker of genuine interest in those striking green eyes. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, Aiden asked, "Let me get this straight. You've never had ice cream? Not once in your life." Altari do not typically consume frozen dairy products, Lady Reyna replied, without looking up. That's criminal, Aiden said, mock-shocked. Seriously, I'm going to have to file a complaint with the High Council. What about movies? Please tell me you've at least watched a movie. We have cultural narratives, she replied, still not looking up. Not the same thing. Movie night is happening, Aiden declared, grinning. I smuggled in some classics from Earth. That would be inappropriate, Lady Reyna said, but Aiden noticed the slight dilation of her pupils. Interest, despite her denial. Science demands exploration, Aiden said with a grin. By the 3rd week, their prototype elixir was taking shape. Aiden had developed a formula that could theoretically stimulate targeted tissue growth in both human and Altari physiology, though it remained untested. The simulation results are promising, Lady Reyna acknowledged as she reviewed the data. But I noticed the effects are significantly stronger on mammalian tissues. That makes sense. We're using modified human growth hormones as the base, Aiden explained. We can adjust the ratios if needed. When will it be ready for preliminary testing? I should have a stable sample by tomorrow, Aiden replied. The next day, he arrived at the lab with a completed prototype, a small vial of iridescent blue liquid, secured in a container labeled Prototype GH7, human use only, in both English and Altari script. Finally, it was ready. Lady Reyna approached his workstation. Is it finished? She asked. Yep, Aiden said. Next step, controlled testing. But we need approval from the ethics committee first. Before she could respond, Commander Delka's voice crackled over the intercom. Lady Reyna, Technician Reyes, your presence is required at tonight's diplomatic reception. The Terran ambassador wishes to review your progress. Aiden groaned inwardly. Great. Politics. It's necessary for securing continued funding, Lady Reyna reminded him. The reception begins in 2 hours. I suggest you find more appropriate attire. What's wrong with my uniform? Aiden asked. Lady Reyna's eyes scanned him in a way that made him suddenly self-conscious. It lacks formality. The diplomatic reception was held in the Institute's Grand Hall, a vast space with crystal chandeliers that refracted light into patterns mimicking Althar's constellations. Aiden had managed to find a formal diplomatic uniform, slightly too tight across the shoulders, but better than nothing. He spotted Lady Reyna immediately, standing among a group of Altari officials in their formal attire, which accentuated her tall, graceful form far more than her lab clothes ever had. Aiden grabbed a drink from a passing server and made his way toward her. As he approached, he noticed how the other Altari deferred to her, their postures stiffening in respect. Lady Reyna, he greeted with a slight bow, remembering his cultural training. You look different outside the lab. She turned to face him, and for a moment, Aiden thought he saw a flash of relief in her eyes. Technician Reyes, she said, her voice neutral. Your attire is adequate. He chuckled. High praise indeed. How long do we have to stay at this thing? Until the ambassador has been properly respected, she replied, then lowered her voice. Approximately 2 hours, if precedent holds. Well, at least there's drinks, Aiden said, raising his glass. He froze, noticing a similar vial in Lady Reyna's hand, the contents eerily familiar, glowing the same iridescent blue as his prototype. His heart skipped a beat. Lady Reyna, wait. But she had already raised the vial to her lips and consumed its contents in one graceful swallow. Aiden's mind raced. That couldn't be his prototype. He had left it secured in the lab, properly labeled. Is something wrong? Lady Reyna asked, noticing the shock on his face. That drink, what was it? The traditional ceremonial beverage, she replied, her expression unreadable. All participants must consume it to signal good faith in negotiations, Lady Reyna said, her voice calm but firm. She tilted her head, regarding Aiden with a slight curiosity. Why do you ask? Aiden forced a smile. No reason, just curious about Altari customs. He spent the next hour in anxious observation, his eyes never straying far from Lady Reyna, watching for any signs of distress. But she continued her duties with unshakable poise, her expression flawless as she engaged in conversation with various dignitaries. By the time he escorted her back to the lab to collect her personal belongings, Aiden had almost convinced himself that it wasn't his prototype she had consumed. Our progress impressed the ambassador, Lady Reyna noted as they entered the lab. Full funding for the next research cycle is virtually guaranteed. Great news, Aiden replied absently, making a beeline for his workstation. The secured container was exactly where he left it, empty. His stomach dropped. Lady Reyna, did you move my prototype? He asked, his voice tight. Why would I? She stopped mid-sentence, a look of sudden realization crossing her face. The ceremonial beverage. Yes, I think you might have just consumed an experimental human growth hormone elixir. Lady Reyna's normally composed face now showed genuine alarm. That's impossible. The servers would never have. She trailed off, the situation clearly dawning on her. Aiden ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Maybe someone thought it was meant for the ceremony. But look, it's designed for human physiology. Your Altari biology should neutralize most of the effects. Lady Reyna nodded slowly, visibly regaining her composure. Yes, Altari cellular structures are fundamentally different from human ones. The probability of cross-species reactivity is minimal. Exactly, Aiden agreed. And even if there is some reaction, the formula is designed to stimulate natural healing and growth processes, not create entirely new ones. Then logically, there is no cause for concern, Lady Reyna said, straightening her shoulders. We will monitor the situation, but I see no reason to panic. Aiden wasn't entirely convinced, but her calm, logical approach helped ease his anxiety. Right, and first thing tomorrow, we'll run some tests to make sure everything's normal. Agreed. Good night, Technician Reyes. Good night, Lady Reyna, Aiden said, then added, and call me if you notice anything unusual. She nodded, her usual grace returning as she left. Aiden remained, staring anxiously at the now empty container. The next morning, Aiden arrived at the lab early, determined to come up with some sort of counteragent just in case. He was deep into molecular modeling when the lab door slammed open with unexpected force. Lady Reyna stood in the doorway, but not with her usual composure. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, her perfect silver hair slightly disheveled, and her formal attire was hastily put together. Most startling of all was her expression, wide-eyed and flustered in a way Aiden had never seen from an Altari. Lady Reyna, what's wrong? He asked, standing and approaching cautiously. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, clearly exhausted. Your elixir, she whispered, her voice shaky. It had had an effect. Aiden's stomach sank. What kind of effect? Lady Reyna's violet skin darkened across her cheeks. My anatomical proportions have altered overnight. Alter how? Aiden asked, though a sinking feeling told him he already knew. Instead of answering, Lady Reyna gestured to her chest, which Aiden now noticed seemed significantly more pronounced than before. The formal attire she typically wore with ease now strained noticeably across her upper body. Oh, was all Aiden could manage. This is unprecedented, Lady Reyna said, her voice rising slightly. Altari females do not possess such excessive mammary development. It's inappropriate. Unseemly. She stopped abruptly, wincing as she shifted position. And Aiden prompted, trying to keep his eyes focused on her face. They are extremely sensitive, she admitted, her flush deepening to a rich purple. Every movement causes sensations. Aiden fought to keep his eyes locked on hers, but he couldn't help but notice her discomfort. I'm sorry, he said. I never thought. You must fix this immediately, Lady Reyna interrupted, her tone sharp. Before anyone discovers what has happened. I'll try, Aiden replied, slipping back into professional mode despite the bizarre situation. But I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. We should run some tests. Lady Reyna's eyes widened in alarm. No tests. No records. No one can know about this, especially not. The lab door slid open, revealing an elderly Altari male in formal council robes. His gaze immediately locked on the scene before him. Lady Reyna's disheveled appearance, and Aiden standing too close for comfort. Uncle the Lion, Lady Reyna gasped, immediately straightening and clasping her hands formally in front of her. Her discomfort was palpable. The elder's eyes narrowed as he took in the situation. Lady Ziva, he acknowledged coldly before turning his steely gaze on Aiden. And this must be the human technician I've heard so much about. Aiden extended his hand, but then remembered Altari, especially high-ranking ones, rarely engaged in physical contact with outsiders. The lion ignored the gesture completely. I came to personally review your research progress, niece, the lion said, his tone cutting. The High Council is most interested in your collaboration. Of course, Uncle, Lady Reyna replied, her professional mask slipping back into place despite the discomfort caused by her altered physique. We were just about to. What has happened to your appearance? The lion interrupted, his gaze fixed firmly on Lady Reyna's altered silhouette. Lady Reyna froze, her composure cracking. It was an accident. Aiden interjected quickly, trying to take control of the situation. It was one of our experimental formulas. Thalian's eyes widened before narrowing dangerously. You experimented on a member of the High Council lineage? No, it was my fault, Lady Reyna quickly clarified. I accidentally consumed. Silence, the lion commanded. His voice echoed with authority. Do you realize what this means? Under Altari law, Human Section 42 of the Ancient Code is explicit. Any outsider who physically alters a noblewoman's body becomes permanently responsible for her. Aiden blinked. Wait, what? Responsible? He repeated, incredulity flooding his voice. Lady Reyna's voice trembled. Uncle, that law is archaic. It hasn't been invoked in generations. Thalian's expression was grim. It has never been removed from the code, and in this case, its application seems most appropriate. He allowed a thin smile to curve his lips, one that could have easily been mistaken for satisfaction. Congratulations, Technician Reyes, the lion continued, his voice cold. According to our most sacred laws, you are now culturally bound to Lady Reyna as her protector and partner. Partner? Aiden echoed, a mix of disbelief and confusion coloring his tone. You mean like fiancé? Yes, fiancé would be the closest approximation, the lion stated flatly. The High Council will be most interested to hear of this development. Without another word, the lion turned on his heel and left as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving Aiden and Lady Reyna standing in stunned silence. Did he just say we're engaged? Aiden finally asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Lady Reyna sank into a chair, wincing as her sensitivity flared again. This is a diplomatic disaster, she whispered. My family, the council, the entire research program. Hang on, Aiden said, still trying to process what had just happened. There must be some way around this. We just need to reverse the effects of the elixir. Lady Reyna looked up at him, her green eyes showing vulnerability he'd never seen before. And if we cannot, Aiden ran a hand through his hair, the full implications of their situation sinking in. Then I guess we're going to find out just how good I am at being a Varian fiancé. Just then, her communicator chimed with multiple incoming messages. News of their engagement was already spreading throughout the academy. Lady Reyna looked down at her altered body, then back at Aiden, a mixture of confusion, embarrassment, and something else flickering across her face. I believe the humans have an expression for situations like this, she said dryly. We are completely, utterly screwed. Aiden leaned against the lab counter, watching her pace back and forth, her communicator chiming relentlessly. Each time she moved, he couldn't help but notice how her enhanced physique shifted beneath her attire, and he quickly averted his gaze. Damn, those Varian robes are really working overtime, he thought to himself, a mixture of guilt and undeniable attraction coursing through him. Stop looking at them, Lady Reyna snapped, crossing her arms defensively over her chest. She immediately winced at the contact. I wasn't, Aiden started but shrugged with a half-grin. Okay, maybe I was. Sue me. I'm only human. This is not amusing, Technician Reyes, Lady Reyna said, her cheeks flushing a deep shade of purple again. The High Council will convene an emergency session by this evening, she added. Well, at least we'll have a deadline, Aiden said, trying to lighten the mood. As Lady Reyna's communicator chimed again, Aiden scanned through molecular formulas on his datapad. We need to tackle this systematically, he said. First, let's work on an antidote. Second, we find a way around this ridiculous law. And third, we figure out how to deal with my uncle, Lady Reyna interjected, her eyes narrowing. Zor is second chair of the High Council. His influence is considerable. Yeah, I got that impression from his warm and fuzzy personality, Aiden said, running a hand through his hair. What's his problem with humans, anyway? He led the opposition to the Human Althari exchange program from the beginning, Lady Reyna explained. He believes Altar should maintain its isolation and cultural purity. Great, Aiden said with a sigh. So I just accidentally handed him the perfect excuse to shut down the entire program. Welcome to my life, Lady Reyna replied, sinking into a chair again, her discomfort still evident. Fantastic, Aiden muttered, scrolling through more formulas. Just fantastic. Lady Reyna's communicator chimed once more. She glanced down, then let out a small sigh of resignation. It's worse than that, she said. The council has appointed a cultural aide to monitor us. Zor, Aiden said, raising an eyebrow. Lady Reyna hesitated. Zor, serve as my childhood instructor in the family disciplines. He is rigidly traditional, even by Altari standards. Fantastic, Aiden groaned. When do we meet this paragon of Altari virtue? As if on cue, the lab door slid open. A tall, skeletal Altari male entered. His silver hair was pulled back into severe braids that emphasized his sharp features and cold, calculating green eyes. Unlike most Altari, who preferred flowing robes, he wore a high-collared formal suit, reminding Aiden of historical Earth military dictators. Lady Reyna, he intoned, his voice cold and clipped, deliberately avoiding her altered figure. I see reports of your condition were not exaggerated. Instructor Zor, Lady Reyna acknowledged with stiff formality, despite the evident discomfort. Zor's gaze shifted to Aiden, narrowing as his vertical pupils contracted into thin slits. And this is the human responsible, he stated coldly. Aiden extended his hand casually, but Zor ignored the gesture completely. You will address me as cultural aid, Zor, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. Sure thing, cultural aid, Zor, Aiden replied, feigning politeness. Or wait, does human go with your name or mine? The syntax is a bit confusing. Lady Reyna shot him a warning glance, which Aiden pretended not to notice. Zor's expression remained unamused as he continued. The High Council has instructed me to monitor this situation until a resolution is reached. You will continue your research while maintaining the appropriate public appearance required by Section 42. What exactly does appropriate public appearance entail? Aiden asked, crossing his arms. You will attend all diplomatic and social functions as Lady Reyna's formal consort. You will observe proper Altari etiquette at all times and refrain from any behavior that could further embarrass the Ziva lineage. So, basically act like I've got a steel rod up my. We understand the requirements. Lady Reyna interrupted hastily. We will comply while seeking a resolution to the physical alteration. Zor's thin lips pressed into a line. See that you do, he said, before turning and leaving as abruptly as he arrived. Charming guy, Aiden muttered as the door closed behind him. Lady Reyna sank back in her chair, clearly exhausted by the whole situation. Zor believes in absolute adherence to tradition, she said, rubbing her temples. And he has never approved of my scientific career. Let me guess, he thinks noble ladies should stick to arranging flowers and planning dinner parties? Aiden asked, trying to lighten the mood. Essentially, yes. Lady Reyna winced again, clearly still adjusting to her altered body. These sensations are distracting. Aiden tried to keep his focus on the problem at hand. Right. Focus, Reyes. Fixing your accidental transformation is the priority. He took a deep breath. Let's get to work on that antidote. And maybe while we're at it, get you some more accommodating clothes. Over the following days, Aiden and Lady Reyna worked tirelessly in the lab, frantically trying to develop a counteragent. But after hours of experiments and simulations, their challenges weren't limited to science alone. As the most talked-about engaged couple at the Academy, they were forced to attend diplomatic functions, much to Aiden's dismay. The first of these events was a diplomatic dinner hosted by the Earth ambassador. Aiden arrived at Celia's quarters to escort her, as tradition apparently required, only to find her visibly distressed. I cannot attend, she declared the moment the door slid open. Aiden stepped inside, allowing the door to close softly behind him. What's wrong? This is wrong. She gestured to her formal attire, a shimmering silver-blue gown that had clearly been altered hastily to accommodate her new proportions. The result was less than flattering, drawing attention to exactly what she wanted to hide. I look beautiful, Aiden finished for her. Celia's head snapped up, her eyes wide. That is not the appropriate response. Maybe not the appropriate Altari response, Aiden countered with a crooked smile. But it's the honest human one. A flush spread across her cheeks, and she turned away.
Your species' preoccupation with physical attributes is incomprehensible, she remarked, trying to compose herself. Says the woman whose people engineer themselves to be 7 feet tall with perfect violet skin and silver hair. Aiden teased. Face it, Celia, Alt-Hari are just as vain as humans. You're just more repressed about it. I am not repressed, she protested. Aha! Aiden stepped closer. Then why are you blushing right now? I am not. Celia touched her cheeks, feeling their warmth. This is simply a physiological reaction to the elixir. If you say so, Aiden replied, offering his arm. Come on. If we have to do this, let's at least have some fun with it. Fun is not the objective, Celia replied firmly. It never is with you people, Aiden sighed, half amused. One dinner. We smile, we nod, we make nice with the ambassador, and then we get back to work on the antidote. Deal. Reluctantly, Celia placed her hand on his arm. The moment of contact sent a visible shiver through her, and her flush deepened. These enhanced sensations are most inconvenient, she murmured. Aiden tried and failed, not to feel a rush of male pride at her reaction to his mere touch. Think of it as a crash course in human-style emotional responses. Might give you some new research insights. The diplomatic dinner was every bit as awkward as Aiden had expected. Ambassador Henderson, a round and jovial man, clearly found the situation amusing, while the Alt-Hari officials maintained their icy formality, barely masking their disapproval. Celia sat rigidly beside Aiden, flinching every time their arms accidentally brushed. So, Reyes, Ambassador Henderson boomed across the table, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of the entire room. I hear congratulations are in order. Never thought I'd see a human Altari engagement during my tenure. It's not exactly a traditional engagement, sir, Aiden replied diplomatically. Nonsense. Love finds a way, doesn't it, Lady Ziva? Henderson winked, his voice thick with amusement. Celia's face flushed a dark shade of purple. Our arrangement is based on cultural obligation, not emotional attachment. Of course, Henderson chuckled. Cultural obligation. That's what all the kids are calling it these days. Aiden bit back a laugh at Celia's mortified expression. Despite the awkwardness, he couldn't help but enjoy himself. There was something satisfying about watching the stiff Altari officials squirm, their discomfort palpable. And, if he was being honest, the possessive glances from other males in the room, both human and Altari, when they looked at Celia's enhanced figure gave him a primitive thrill. This arrangement might have been accidental, Aiden thought, but I could definitely think of worse ways to spend my time on Altar. The dinner mercifully concluded, but as they were leaving, Zor materialized at their side. The formal announcement ceremony will be held tomorrow evening, he informed them coldly. What formal announcement? Aiden asked, confused. The public acknowledgement of your cultural binding, Zor replied, his eyes narrowing. It is required by tradition. We're a little busy trying to solve this problem, Aiden objected, his voice sharp. Tradition does not yield to convenience human, Zor said with finality. After Zor departed, Aiden turned to Celia. Is he serious? We have to do a whole ceremony about this. The binding announcement is significant in Altari culture, Celia explained. Normally, it would be a joyous occasion, with representatives from both families. Well, my family consists of exactly nobody, so that simplifies things on my end, Aiden replied with a small grin. Celia glanced at him, curiosity overcoming her discomfort. You have no family? Orphan at 6, Aiden said, shrugging. Grew up in the Luna Colony system. Holmes. I see. My condolences, Celia said softly, a hint of sympathy flashing in her eyes before she quickly concealed it. They didn't make me who I am today, Aiden said, a smirk tugging at his lips. Devastatingly handsome, brilliant, and humble to a fault. Her lips twitched, the beginning of a smile. Your humility is indeed your most prominent characteristic. Was that sarcasm, Lady Ziva? Aiden grinned. I'm corrupted already, she muttered under her breath. The binding announcement ceremony was exactly the kind of formal, stilted-affair Aiden had expected. He stood beside Celia on a raised platform in the Academy's Grand Hall, surrounded by Altari officials and a small contingent of Earth representatives. Celia wore another hastily altered formal gown, which did nothing to hide her new curves, and the whispers and stares from the assembled crowd made her flush continuously. The Lion presided over the ceremony, his expression so grim it looked as though he were announcing a funeral instead of an engagement. He droned on about sacred traditions and cultural responsibilities, while Aiden fought the urge to fidget, as decreed by Section 42 of the Ancient Code. The Lion continued, his voice echoing to the hall. When an outsider physically alters a noblewoman, they assume responsibility for her care and protection. Nicholas Reyes of Earth is thus bound to Lady Celia Ziva until such time as the alteration is reversed or until death severs the bond. Well, that's romantic, Aiden thought sardonically. The Human Altari Exchange program will continue under increased supervision, the Lion continued, while the bound couple seeks resolution to their situation. After the ceremony, Aiden and Celia escaped to a small antechamber away from prying eyes and whispers. Well, that was excruciating, Aiden declared, loosening the collar of his formal uniform. Do we get a reception with cake, or is that too emotional for Altari? This is not a joke, Celia snapped, using his first name for the first time. My reputation, my position in the academy, my family's standing, all are in jeopardy because of this. Hey, Aiden's tone softened. We'll fix this. The latest simulation looks promising. The compound should be ready for testing tomorrow. Celia nodded, but her posture remained tense. And if it fails? Then we try again, Aiden said, hesitating before adding. For what it's worth, being culturally bound to you isn't exactly a hardship from my perspective. Her eyes snapped to his. What do you mean? I mean you're brilliant, accomplished, and gorgeous. With or without the enhancements, Aiden grinned. Plenty of guys would kill to be in my position. You find the situation agreeable? She asked, disbelief coloring her voice. I wouldn't have chosen these exact circumstances, Aiden admitted. But spending time with you? Yeah, That part one don't mind at all. Celia stared at him, clearly struggling to process his honesty. Before she could respond, Zor entered the antechamber. Your public expressions of affection are required for the reception, he announced coldly. Public expressions of what now? Aiden asked. It is expected that newly bound couples display appropriate physical contact, Zor said with distaste. Hand-holding would be sufficient. After Zor left, Aiden turned to Celia with raised eyebrows. Hand-holding. Scandalous, Celia muttered. Physical contact between nobles and commoners is traditionally forbidden, except in binding situations. She flushed again, and with my enhanced sensitivity.
Aiden offered his hand with an exaggerated bow. Shall we scandalize the assembled masses, my lady? With visible trepidation, Celia placed her hand in his. The effect was immediate. She gasped softly, her eyes widening at the intensity of the sensation. You okay? Aiden asked, genuinely concerned despite the ego boost her reaction gave him. It's overwhelming, she admitted. Every nerve ending seems amplified. Aiden gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Just focus on me. Ignore everyone else. Something in his tone made her look up. Their eyes met for a moment, and the practiced formality in her expression melted away, revealing genuine vulnerability, and something else that made Aiden's heart rate quicken. Maybe this accidental engagement isn't the worst thing that could have happened, he thought, as they returned to the reception, her hand warm and soft in his. The next day brought both breakthrough and disaster. Their latest compound successfully reversed the effects of the elixir in simulation. But as they prepared to synthesize it, the laboratory's safety systems suddenly engaged, sealing them inside. Warning, containment breach detected, the automated system announced. Emergency lockdown initiated. What the hell? Aiden rushed to the control panel. There's no breach, he said, scanning the system. The system's been tampered with. Celia joined him at the console. The lockdown protocol has been manually overridden. We cannot disengage it from inside. Who would? Aiden stopped as a realization hit him. Zor, he muttered. That's a serious accusation, Celia said, her voice laced with doubt. Come on, Celia. He's been looking for any excuse to sabotage us from the beginning. Celia frowned at the console. Regardless, we are sealed in for the standard quarantine period. 12 hours. Aiden sighed. Well, at least we can keep working on the antidote. As the hours passed, they worked side by side, occasionally brushing against each other in the confined space. Each contact sent visible shivers through Celia, and her composure became harder to maintain. You should rest, Aiden suggested, after she fumbled a sample for the third time. You're exhausted. I'm fine, she insisted, but her voice lacked its usual assurance. Celia. Aiden placed his hands on her shoulders, gently turning her to face him. Talk to me. What's really going on? The direct contact, combined with his intense gaze, broke through her remaining defenses. I can't control it, she whispered. The emotions, the sensations, they're overwhelming. The physical changes? Not just that, she looked away. The elixir has affected my neural patterns. The emotional discipline I've maintained since childhood is deteriorating. Aiden's brow furrowed. What kind of discipline? Altari nobility undergo neurological conditioning from an early age, she explained. We learn to suppress emotional responses to prioritize duty and logic over personal desires. Her hands trembled slightly. Without that conditioning, you're feeling things you weren't supposed to feel, Aiden finished softly. She nodded, her eyes meeting his with startling directness. I have never experienced emotions with such intensity. It's frightening. Welcome to being human, Aiden said with a gentle smile. We live in that intensity all the time. What do you function? She asked. How do you make rational decisions when your body betrays you at every turn? We don't always make rational decisions, Aiden admitted. But sometimes the irrational ones turn out to be the most important. They lapsed into silence, the air between them charged with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Aiden asked the question that had been bothering him. What was your childhood like, growing up as Altari nobility? Celia considered for a moment. Structured, demanding, every moment scheduled. Every action evaluated against the standards of our lineage. Sounds lonely. It was appropriate, she countered, though her tone lacked conviction. What about fun? Play? Friends? Such things were considered distractions from our purpose, she said softly. Though I did once create an unauthorized experiment, growing crystal formations in my sleep chamber. My mother discovered it and got mad. She was disappointed. That's why you became a scientist, Aiden realized. To have a legitimate outlet for your curiosity. Celia looked surprised, as if she'd never considered it. Perhaps. And you? She asked. Why cybernetics? When you grow up in the system, you learn to fix things yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Aiden shrugged. I was good with machines. Got a scholarship to MIT Luna and never looked back. You overcame significant obstacles, Celia observed. Didn't have much choice, Aiden replied. It was that, or end up mining ice on Europa with the other colony orphans. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the lab, cutting their conversation short. Sparks flew from the central processing unit as smoke began filling the chamber. System failure, the computer announced. Fire suppression offline. Aiden lunged for the emergency extinguisher, but a secondary explosion knocked him backward. He hit the floor hard, his vision blurring from the impact. Through the smoke, he saw a ceiling panel break loose directly above him. Before he could move, Celia's form appeared above him, shielding his body with her own as the panel crashed down, striking her shoulder with a sickening crack. But she didn't flinch. Her body remained firmly positioned to protect him. When the smoke cleared and the emergency system finally engaged, Aiden helped Celia to a sitting position, stunned by what she had done. You could have been seriously injured, he said, examining her shoulder. As could you, she replied simply. Why would you do that? Varian nobles don't risk themselves for commoners, Aiden murmured, his voice filled with disbelief. Especially not alien commoners, she finished softly. Celia met Aiden's gaze directly. Perhaps I am no longer functioning according to Altari noble parameters. The weight of her words lingered in the air, a quiet pause between them, before the lab doors slid open, revealing Zor and a security team. What happened? Zor demanded, his eyes narrowing at their proximity. A equipment malfunction, Aiden replied, deliberately omitting his suspicions. Convenient timing, Zor muttered, his expression unreadable. The High Council convenes tomorrow to evaluate your progress. I suggest you prepare your report carefully, human. The High Council chamber intimidated even Aiden, with its soaring crystal dome and the 13 elevated seats arranged in a semicircle. Celia stood beside him, her posture rigid, despite the lingering pain from her injured shoulder. Her physical changes were still apparent, despite the specially designed formal robes meant to conceal them. The lion occupied the second chair, with Zor standing at his right hand. Their matching expressions of disdain made their alliance abundantly clear. We have reviewed your progress reports, the lion announced, his voice cold. They are insufficient. We've had some setbacks, Aiden countered, but our latest formula shows promise in simulation. Simulations are not results, Zor interjected. He activated a holographic display showing laboratory records, altered to suggest that Aiden had deliberately targeted the elixir for variant consumption. Certain evidence has come to light that casts doubt on your intentions, Technician Reyes. That's fabricated, Celia protested. The original formula was clearly labeled for human physiology only. And yet you consumed it, the lion noted, his voice tight. Perhaps because you were encouraged to do so. That's ridiculous, Aiden snapped. Why would I want this to happen? To secure a cultural binding with a member of the High Council lineage? Zor suggested smoothly. An ambitious move for a human of your limited standing. The council murmured, clearly swayed by this interpretation. These accusations are baseless, Celia declared, her voice stronger than Aiden had ever heard it. Technician Reyes has worked tirelessly to reverse the effects. Your judgment is compromised. Compromised? The lion said dismissively. The elixir has affected your emotional control, a fact evident to all present. As if to prove his point, Celia's cheeks flushed with anger, her enhanced sensitivity to criticism obvious. The council has reached its decision, the lion continued. Technician Nicholas Reyes will be removed from the exchange program and deported to Earth immediately. And Lady Ziva? Aiden demanded. Zor's thin lips curved into what might have been satisfaction. Lady Ziva will undergo the purification procedure to reverse both the physical and neurological effects of the contamination. Purification. Aiden looked at Celia, whose face had gone pale. What is that? A complete neural reset, Celia whispered. It would remove all effect of the elixir, but also much of my recent memory and emotional development. It would make me a proper Varian noble once again. You can't do this, Aiden protested, anger rising in his chest. That procedure could cause permanent damage. The decision is made, the lion declared. Security will escort Technician Reyes to detention pending deportation. The purification procedure will be performed at dawn. As the guards moved to separate them, Aiden caught Celia's eye for the first time since he'd known her. Her emotions were written plainly on her face, fear, regret, and something deeper that made his chest tighten. This isn't over, he promised, as they pulled him away. The last thing he saw before the council chamber doors closed was Celia standing alone, her violet skin pale with dread, her altered body a visible reminder of how a simple accident had changed everything between them. Aiden paced the narrow confines of his detention cell. 8 steps forward, 8 steps back. The sterile white space offered nothing to focus on except his mounting frustration and the countdown clock on the wall. 54 hours, 72 minutes, 22 seconds until his scheduled deportation. Damn it, he muttered, slamming his fist against the wall. The thought of Celia facing that purification procedure made his blood boil. He'd seen the fear in her eyes. Whatever this procedure entailed, it wasn't just about reversing physical changes. They were going to rewire her brain, strip away the emotional awakening she'd experienced. The very idea made him sick. Over the past weeks, he'd watched Celia transform from a cold, distant aristocrat into someone vibrant and alive. Yes, her enhanced figure had caught his attention initially. He was only human, after all, but it was the woman emerging from behind that rigid Varian mask who had truly captivated him. And now they were going to erase her like deleting a file they didn't like. Aiden had never been one for serious relationships. Life as an orphan had taught him to keep things casual, to avoid attachments that could be taken away. But Celia, she was different. The way she'd thrown herself between him and danger in the lab, the vulnerability in her eyes when she spoke of her childhood, the flush that spread across her violet skin whenever he touched her. Those weren't things he could just walk away from. The cell door chimed, interrupting his thoughts. Aiden tensed, ready for another round with Zor or the guards. But when the door slid open, he found himself facing a young Varian female he'd never seen before. She was clearly related to Celia. Similar elegant features, silver hair, though her violet skin was a shade lighter and her green eyes lacked the golden tint of Celia's. Unlike most Varians he'd encountered, she wore her silver hair in a simple style, and her clothing was less formal, almost rebellious by Varian standards. "You must be Aiden Reyes," she said, glancing back over her shoulder before stepping inside, allowing the door to close behind her. "And you are Kira Zivithara, Celia's sister." She fixed him with an appraising look. "I expected someone more imposing, given the way you've thrown our entire societal structure into chaos." Aiden couldn't help but grin. Sorry to disappoint. The chaos-causing muscles are hidden under the uniform. To his surprise, Kira laughed, a sound he'd rarely heard from any Varian. "I can see why my sister is risking everything for you." "Risking everything? What do you mean?" Aiden asked, his confusion growing. Kira's expression turned serious. "Celia has refused the purification procedure." "She did what?" Aiden's mind raced. "She told the council she would not submit to neural recalibration," Kira said, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of concern and admiration. "She said she'd rather be exiled than return to emotional suppression." Aiden felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by alarm. What did the council do? They've confined her to our family estate until they can resolve her temporary mental instability, Kira said bitterly. Uncle the Lion is trying to invoke the family override protocol, which would allow him to authorize the procedure without her consent. That's barbaric, Aiden growled. That's Varian tradition, Kira corrected, her voice full of bitterness. Why do you think I joined the cultural reform movement? A cultural reform movement? Aiden raised an eyebrow. It's small but growing. Many younger Varians question the emotional conditioning, the rigid hierarchy, the isolation. She pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it on the cell wall. A soft pulse emitted, and the surveillance indicator in the corner of the cell dimmed. We don't have much time. The security dampener only works for a few minutes, Kira explained. Aiden straightened, a sense of urgency building. You're here to get me out? I'm here because my sister's neurological scans show something the Council is desperately trying to conceal, Kira said urgently. The elixir didn't just enhance her physically. It temporarily neutralized the genetic modifications that suppress emotional responses in Varian nobility. Wait, genetic modifications? Aiden's confusion deepened. You're saying Varian nobles are genetically engineered to not feel emotions? Not all emotions, just the intense ones. Kira's expression hardened. Passion, desire, rage, deep joy. Our ancestors believed these feelings led to conflict and instability, so they engineered the ruling class to prioritize logic and duty above all else. That's messed up, Aiden said flatly. Yes, but it's also the foundation of our social hierarchy. Kira checked a sleek wrist device. We have 3 minutes. Will you help save my sister from being emotionally lobotomized or not? Aiden didn't hesitate. What's the plan? 30 minutes later, Aiden and Kira crouched in the underbrush at the edge of the Zivithera estate's perimeter. The sprawling compound was surrounded by a shimmering energy field and patrolled by security drones. You sure this will work? Aiden whispered, eyeing the drones nervously. Kira held up a small control module. The family security grid recognizes my biometric signature. I can create a temporary opening. Once we're inside, Celia is being held in the East Wing. Our parents and the family elders are gathered in the main hall, likely trying to persuade her to accept the procedure voluntarily. She gave him a sidelong glance. You'll have approximately 20 minutes before the line arrives with a medical team. 20 minutes to find Celia, and then, where'd we go? The entire planet's looking for us. The reform movement has a sanctuary in the northern mountains, Kira said. If you can get Celia there, we can hide until the Council's next public session, 3 days from now. And then, Aiden asked, already knowing the answer. Then we can present our findings about the elixir and the genetic modifications to the full Council and the public, Kira said, her eyes burning with determination. Many Varians suspect our emotional conditioning goes beyond discipline and training. Concrete proof could spark the reforms we've been working toward for years. Aiden nodded, absorbing the enormity of what they were attempting. Let's do this. Kira activated her device, and a section of the energy barrier rippled and parted. They slipped through, hugging the shadows of ornamental crystal trees that lined the approach to the massive estate. The main building resembled an ancient earth cathedral made of living crystal, with soaring spires that seemed to capture and amplify the violet light of Vera's twin suns. They reached a side entrance, where Kira pressed her palm to the scanner. The door slid open silently. The east wing is through the grand gallery and up the celestial staircase, she whispered. I'll create a distraction in the main hall to keep the elders occupied. Nick squeezed her shoulder. Thank you for this. Just don't mess it up, human, Kira replied with a hint of a smile. My sister deserves someone who can keep up with her intellect, even if he is emotionally undisciplined. I'll take that as a compliment, Aiden grinned. Kira slipped away toward the main hall, while Aiden made his way through the grand gallery, a cavernous space lined with holographic displays of Ziva ancestors, stern, emotionless figures, each a reminder of the rigid culture they were trying to escape. He reached the celestial staircase, a gravity-defying spiral of crystalline steps that seemed to float upward without support, and began his ascent. At the top, he paused, listening. From somewhere at his right came the sound of voices, stern, insistent tones met with a familiar, defiant response that made his heart leap. Aiden followed the sound to an ornate door, slightly ajar. Through the gap, he could see Celia standing by a window, her back straight, facing an older variant female who could only be her mother. Despite the situation, Aiden couldn't help but appreciate how the sunlight streaming through the window highlighted Celia's figure, her enhanced curves evident even beneath the formal robe she wore. "Your defiance dishonors our lineage," the older woman was saying. "The procedure is for your own good." "My own good." Celia's voice carried an emotion Aiden had never heard from her before, genuine anger. "Or the good of the Council's agenda. The elixir didn't damage me, Mother. It freed me." "These are not your true feelings, daughter," her mother countered. "This is chemical interference. These are the feelings you and Father had genetically suppressed," Celia retorted, her hands clenching at her sides. "For the first time in my life, I'm experiencing emotions without filtering them through layers of conditioning. I feel joy, excitement, desire." "Disgraceful," her mother interrupted. "Perhaps the laborers have it right," Celia countered. "Perhaps true connection requires emotional honesty, not the sanitized approximation we've been taught to accept." Aiden had heard enough. He pushed the door open, stepping into the room. "Couldn't have said it better myself." Both women froze. Celia's eyes widened in shock, while her mother's narrowed in outrage. "Guards," the older woman called sharply. "They're a little busy with Kira's distraction," Aiden replied, moving further into the room. "Nice place you got here." "Very sterile." Celia breathed, her composure cracking. "How did you—" "Your sister's pretty cool for a variant," Aiden said with a grin. "Seems to think you're worth breaking a few rules for." Celia's mother drew herself up to her full height, a good foot taller than Aiden. "This is an outrage. An alien intruder in the family quarters. Actually, according to your ancient laws, I'm practically family," Aiden interrupted. "Being culturally bound to your daughter and all. A temporary aberration that will be corrected at dawn," Lady Ziva snapped. "No, Mother, it won't." Celia stepped forward, placing herself between Aiden and her mother. "I meant what I said. I refuse the procedure. I will not allow you to erase the person I've become. The person I was always meant to be before genetic manipulation stifled my true nature." A commotion from the hallway interrupted them. Kira appeared at the doorway, breathless. "The Lion has arrived early with the medical team. We need to go now." Lady Ziva moved to block their path. "Leah, think of your position. Your responsibilities." "I am," Celia replied, her voice steady for the first time. "I'm thinking about my responsibility to myself and to all the other variants who have had their emotional birthrights stolen by this twisted tradition." She turned to Aiden, and what he saw in her eyes, the unveiled emotion, raw and powerful, nearly took his breath away. "I choose this," she said simply. "I choose to feel." Without warning, she closed the distance between them and took his hand. The contact sent a visible shiver through her, her violet skin flushing a deep purple from her cheeks down her neck, disappearing beneath her robe. Aiden could feel the tremor in her fingers, the intensity of her reaction to his touch making his own pulse quicken. Lady Ziva gasped in shock at the public display. "Celia, control yourself." "That's exactly what I'm choosing not to do anymore, Mother." Celia's voice was firm. She kept her eyes locked on Aiden's. "Ready?" Aiden grinned. "Lead the way, gorgeous." They bolted past the stunned Lady Ziva, following Kira down a service corridor that led to a private landing pad where a small transport vessel awaited. "This will take you to the northern mountains," Kira explained as they boarded. "The coordinates are pre-programmed." "You're not coming?" Celia asked. Kira shook her head. "Someone needs to stay behind to feed misinformation to the Lion. Besides," she added with a sly smile, "you two probably need some privacy to discuss strategy." Aiden laughed as Celia's face flushed purple again. "I like your sister," he told Celia. "She's always been the rebellious one," Celia replied, settling into the pilot's seat with practiced ease. "I was the perfect Ziva daughter. Until..." until you accidentally drank my special juice and grew a pair of... Yes, thank you. That's quite enough, Celia cut him off, her flush deepening as she activated the transport's engines. That particular detail need not be repeated at every opportunity. Sorry, Aiden said, not sounding sorry at all. They're just kind of hard to ignore, especially when you're all flustered and glowy. Celia glanced down at her chest, where her enhanced curve strained against her formal robe. These physical alterations are the least significant change the elixir has caused, she said quietly. I know, Aiden's tone softened. The emotional stuff, that's what's really freaking them out, isn't it? She nodded, guiding the transport away from the estate and toward the distant mountains. Emotional control is the foundation of our social order. If nobles began experiencing full emotional capacity, they might realize how messed up the whole system is. Aiden finished for her, precisely. They flew in companionable silence for a while, the transport skimming over Vera's violet forest toward the jagged peaks on the horizon. Finally, Aiden asked, no regrets about refusing the procedure? Celia considered the question seriously. The physical changes are inconvenient, though not entirely unpleasant. But the emotional awakening. She shook her head. I could no more return to emotional suppression than you could choose to stop breathing. I've got to say, I like this version of you, Aiden admitted. Not that the Ice Queen scientist wasn't hot, too, in her own intimidating way. You found me attractive even before the physical enhancement. Celia sounded genuinely surprised. Are you kidding? Aiden grinned. Tall, brilliant, gorgeous alien woman who could calculate molecular bonds in her head and looked at me like I was simultaneously the most fascinating and annoying creature in the galaxy. Total turn-on. Celia's lips curved in a smile, more uninhibited than any Aiden had seen from her before. You are a very strange human. That's part of my charm, Aiden replied. The Reform Movement Sanctuary turned out to be a complex of caves transformed into surprisingly comfortable living quarters nestled high in the northern mountains. For 3 days, Aiden and Celia worked with the movement scientists, analyzing the data from Celia's neural scans and comparing them to historical records secretly compiled by the reformers. Aiden was amazed to discover the extent of the reform movement. Hundreds of younger variants who questioned the rigid traditions and emotional suppression of their society. Many were low-ranking nobles who had received less extensive genetic modification than the high-ranking families, allowing them to experience glimpses of what full emotional capacity might feel like. On the morning of the council's public session, Celia found Aiden on an observation platform, watching the twin suns rise over the violet forest far below. Beautiful view, he commented as she joined him. Indeed, she agreed, but she wasn't looking at the landscape. Her eyes were fixed on his profile, a new boldness in her gaze that made his skin warm. Ready for today? He asked, turning to face her. As ready as possible, she replied. She wore a formal robe provided by the Reform Movement, modified to accommodate her enhanced figure without emphasizing it. The evidence is compelling, but the Council is deeply invested in maintaining the status quo, she said. Then we'll just have to be more compelling, Aiden said confidently. Celia hesitated, then stepped closer to him. Aiden, regardless of what happens today, I want you to know that I do not regret drinking the elixir. Her voice lowered. These past weeks have been the most meaningful of my life. Even the embarrassing parts, the blushing, the staring, the whispers, even those, she admitted, they were worth it for the other experiences. Aiden raised an eyebrow. Other experiences? Instead of answering, Celia closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The effect was electric. Her violet skin flushed immediately, a wave of deep purple spreading visibly down her neck and across what he could see of her chest. She trembled against him, clearly overwhelmed by the sensations, but she didn't pull away. When they finally separated, her breath came in quick gasps. That was most illuminating. Aiden laughed, his arms still around her waist. That's one way to put it. I'd go with mind-blowing myself, he added with a grin. We should proceed to the transport, she said, making no move to step away from him. The council session begins in 2 hours. Right? Aiden reluctantly released her. Let's go overthrow your society's oppressive emotional regime. The Grand Council chamber was packed to capacity with dignitaries, scientists, and citizens, filling every available space. Word had spread of Celia's defiance and the upcoming challenge to the council's authority, drawing unprecedented public interest. Aiden and Celia stood before the semicircle of council members, facing Thalian's cold fury and Zor's calculating stare. Behind them, members of the reform movement had strategically positioned themselves throughout the chamber, ready to show support. Lady Ziva, the council leader, an ancient Varian named Vach, addressed Celia. You stand accused of violating the sacred traditions of our people and bringing dishonor to your lineage through public emotional displays. How do you respond? Celia's voice rang clear through the chamber. I stand before you not as an accused, but as a revelation. The elixir I consumed did not damage me. It freed me from genetic manipulation that I never consented to. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Nonsense, the lion interjected. The emotional discipline of nobility is achieved through training and meditation. Lies. Aiden stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed Celia's neural scans alongside historical medical records. Your so-called discipline is genetically engineered suppression, targeting specific brain regions responsible for emotional processing. The murmur grew louder. The evidence is clear, Celia continued. For generations, the high noble families have been subjected to genetic modification without their knowledge or consent, creating an artificial hierarchy based not on merit, but on emotional dampening. This is treasonous fabrication, Zor declared, but his voice lacked conviction as the evidence hovered in the air for all to see. Is it? Aiden challenged. Then explain why Lady Ziva's neural patterns, after exposure to the elixir, matched those of historical variants from before the great emotional discipline supposedly began. The council chambers erupted in chaos as people began discussing the implications. VDH banged his ceremonial staff for order. Even if what you say has merit, he finally said, these measures were implemented for the stability of our society. Unfettered emotions led to the great conflict that nearly destroyed our civilization. With respect, Elder, a new voice called out. Kira stepped forward from the crowd. That history has been distorted, Kira said. The ancient records show that it was not emotion itself that caused the conflict, but the imbalance between those who could feel and those who were denied that right. Other reformers stood, adding their voices in support. We are not advocating for chaos, Celia said firmly. We are advocating for choice. Let each variant decide whether to undergo emotional conditioning rather than imposing it from birth. Impossible, the lion scoffed. The foundation of our society is built on a lie. Aiden finished. And now that lie has been exposed. You can adapt, or you can watch your perfect society fracture from within, as more and more variants discover the truth. The council members conferred among themselves, their expressions grave. Finally, VTH addressed the chamber. These revelations require careful consideration. The council will recess to deliberate. Hours later, the council reconvened. VTH's expression was solemn as he delivered their decision. After reviewing the evidence, the council acknowledges that certain historical measures were implemented without full disclosure to our people. He paused, clearly struggling with the admission. In the interest of preventing societal discord, we propose the following compromise. The terms were better than Aiden had hoped. The practice of genetic emotional suppression will be made optional for future generations. A new human variant cultural exchange initiative will be established to explore the benefits of emotional integration, with Aiden and Celia appointed as joint directors. And most surprisingly, VTH continued, the council agrees to create a reform advisory committee with Kira as its head. He paused, then added, we acknowledge that Lady Ziva's condition resulted from an accident, rather than deliberate action by Technician Reyes. Therefore, while the cultural binding may be dissolved if both parties wish, we don't. Nick interrupted, taking Celia's hand without hesitation. She flushed immediately, but her fingers twined firmly with his. "Well, he said, looking somewhat bemused. "Let it be recorded that the binding stands by mutual consent." As the chamber emptied, Zor approached them, his expression unreadable. "You have altered the course of Varian society," he said stiffly. "Time will tell if for better or worse." "Time will tell," Celia agreed. "But for the first time, we will face that future honestly, with our full selves, not just the parts deemed acceptable by tradition." Zor departed without further comment, but the lion lingered, studying them with narrowed eyes. "This is not over, niece," he warned quietly. "Some traditions do not die easily. Neither does the desire for freedom." "Uncle," Celia replied calmly, "you would understand that if you allowed yourself to feel it." 1 month later, Aiden and Celia stood on the balcony of the newly established Cultural Exchange Center, watching the sunset paint Vera's crystalline spires in shades of deep purple and gold. The first group of human scientists would arrive the following day, and a contingent of young variants, including some who had chosen to undergo the reversal of their emotional conditioning, were preparing for exchange visits to Earth. "Quite a view," Aiden said, slipping his arm around Celia's waist. Indeed, she leaned into him, no longer startled by her body's response to his touch, though the flush still spread across her violet skin, a reaction Aiden suspected would never completely fade. "Any regrets?" he asked, genuinely curious about the elixir, the changes, any of it. Celia turned to face him, her golden green eyes holding his gaze steadily. "I never thought I'd say this," she replied with a smile, "but thank you for enlarging my perspective on life." Aiden burst out laughing. "Did you just make a boob joke? I've corrupted you completely." "Perhaps," she admitted, her flush deepening. "Or perhaps you simply helped me discover who I already was beneath the suppression." "I like who you are," Aiden said honestly, enhanced assets and all. In response, Celia did something unprecedented in Varian history. She initiated a public kiss with her human partner right there on the balcony, in full view of the plaza below. As their lips met, her heightened sensitivity triggered something new. A soft bioluminescent glow spread across her violet skin, lighting her from within, like the aurora that sometimes danced above Vera's poles. The gathered crowd below fell silent, then erupted in cheer, led by the unmistakable voice of Kira. When they parted, Aiden grinned at Celia's luminous blush. "Did you just literally light up because I kissed you?" "A previously undocumented side effect," she murmured, unsuccessfully fighting her embarrassment. "I think it's awesome," Aiden declared. "My very own glow-in-the-dark alien girlfriend." "The correct term is cultural bond partner," Celia corrected primly, though her eyes sparkled with humor. "Nope, definitely girlfriend," Aiden insisted, pulling her close again. "Or maybe fiancé. We'll work up to wife." Presumptuous human. Bioluminescent alien. As the twin suns of Vera Prime dipped below the horizon, casting their final rays across the city, Aiden and Celia remained on the balcony, silhouetted against the darkening sky. A human and a Varian, bound together by an accidental elixir that had changed not just a body, but an entire world. And if Celia's enhanced curves pressed a little more firmly against Aiden's chest as they embraced again, well, some accidents, it seemed, were worth keeping.